Hey everyone, today I wanted to do an overview and impressions video for Limbo Eternal War. This was a game that I kickstarted in 2018 and it delivered finally in 2020 around April or May. So it took a while to come, and by the time it arrived I was feeling very frustrated with the project in general, but when I saw the minis, had them in my hands, I instantly wanted to keep them. Any thoughts of selling or getting rid of it, because it had taken so long, were gone. But I stuck it on my shelf, and while I did take it out every now and then to drool over the minis or try and read the rule book, maybe set it up, I sleeve the cards, that kind of stuff, I never actually played the game to see if it was any good. I think I mostly backed for the sake of the miniatures to use for other games. But just recently there was a relaunch Kickstarter, or a reprint I guess, for a 1.5 version of the game, which was promising some improvements for things about the game that bothered me and a lot of other people who had it. So I wanted to see if the gameplay was actually any good to decide if I was going to back the new campaign or not. So I grabbed the game off my shelf, I read the rules, read them again, went online, onto some forums, got some questions answered, and my wife and I gave the game a try. She's not a big fan of these types of miniature skirmish games, but she's a good sport, and she crushed me, of course. She had the angels on her side, and my demons were no match for her. And so after finally getting the game played, and knowing that the campaign was coming up, I ended up deciding to back the new campaign. And I went in for more than I thought. I was just going to get the upgrade pack, but they were offering a new faction. I went in for that, so they were asking for people to make videos talking about the game, and I decided I'd make one and give you my thoughts and tell you what made me choose to back this again. So for those who maybe haven't heard of this game, Limbo is a miniature skirmish game. You are choosing a small force of models from whatever your faction is. In my case, I have a light faction and a dark. Within those factions, there are several different choices of heroes and troops, as well as two lords. So you can see on the left we have Gluttony. That's one of the lords for the dark faction. And on the right we have Raphael for the light. I also, just so you can get a close-up of some models, this is Wrath, the great big demon. He's the one I used for my gameplay with my wife, who had for herself this beautiful model named Veronique. I think this was the model that initially sold me on the campaign. Look for yourself. And this is very representative of all the models for Limbo. They're pretty inventive. They're trying to do interesting things, like having models suspended in the air. Lots of detail, not so much on this shield part, but everywhere else. Interesting base, that kind of thing. And so you're gonna pick your lords, you're gonna pick some heroes, some troops, and you and an opponent will fight. There's a battlefield where you'll set up your armies, and you'll choose a scenario and go till somebody gets either the objective complete or a certain number of victory points gained, or whatever that happens to be. So in talking about how this game works, I'll include some of my impressions, going over some of the things that I liked or didn't like about the game. So one of the first things I want to talk about is this board right here. This is the fate board. Here is where you have different pools for fate, one for each player, and you'll have a certain number of points in each, and you use those points to spend on your abilities. So for example, here is the card for Wrath. You can see in the middle here he has this Inspire Frenzy with 2. So this ability costs 2 fate points to activate. So if this was my side, I would take these points and I would put them over here. I'd spend those 2. And so then after Wrath has done all his things, then I slide those over to my opponent's side, and now they have those fate points. So you can see there's a really interesting push and pull mechanic going on here, where you're spending your fate points to activate abilities, which you need to gain some sort of advantage in battle, but at the same time as you're spending those, you're giving them to your opponent, and they are able to use them on their turn for their abilities. Furthermore, at the end of every round, once everyone's done all their activations, whoever has the most fate points gains victory points based on the difference between the two. So in this case, there being 6 over here and 1 over here, this player would gain 5 victory points. And so I think that's a really interesting system, because it makes you pause and think about how important it is to use that ability. But I found that even though you might feel hesitant to use some of your abilities because you don't want to give your opponent fate points, that there's enough back and forth that you're still using your abilities quite often. And so that's a little bit of a worry that I had, that I would hold back too much, but in the end it was just more fun to use the abilities. Something else interesting about Limbo is where you build your force. There's quite a bit of variety in how you can do that. Not only are you choosing from these 2 different lords, you're also choosing from a myriad of heroes and a bunch of different troops. And then as well, you're able to upgrade them with cards like this. So you pay a certain number of points. You'll agree beforehand how many points each player has to spend on their units and their upgrades. And so each unit can take one of these upgrades. And there are different ones, different effects, but that's a way that you can tailor each unit to either improve its strengths or maybe make up for some sort of weakness that they might have. You're also going to be able to pick a deity that is like an overall boon or buff for your side. And it'll offer sometimes just passive abilities, sometimes it'll give you extra abilities to be available for any of your units at any time, as long as you have the fate to use them or the actions available. And then as well, there is a pool of, I don't know, 60 or 70 maybe of these fate cards, and each player has to build a deck of 20 cards, and each card needs to be unique. And you'll see like Poking the Bear has the beast trait. So the way these work is you have traits on the cards. So Brute, Demon, Hunter, Leader, and Sin. So any cards in this that have those keywords can be used on that unit. And so there'll be some that are for demons only, some that are for the holy or human characters only. And so that's another interesting way that you can create some variety with your force, because as you play, you're going to start with 4 of these cards in your hand, and then you'll get more as the game goes on. And so you'll see like some of them, like this one, has no cost. This is the cost in fate points. And there'll be some that are 3-4 points. And they do a lot of interesting things. They let your characters move again or act again, or block attacks or counter attacks, all kinds of interesting ideas in those cards. And so all that combined, I think, gives a lot of variety, especially when you think there are only these 2 factions. The next Kickstarter is going to have a 3rd faction, the Noadin. It's a Viking group, so that's going to introduce, with a new faction, that's more units to try, as well as probably some new upgrades, fate cards, and things like that. So I I really like that there's a lot to pick from. It helps keep the game from getting stale. And I know after the first game I played, I was dreaming about how I would have played it if I used the same force, and also how am I going to redo the things that I picked, make new armies. Those are the things that I love about like these tabletop games is building a force and thinking about all the different choices you have. And so I feel like Limbo offers a lot of different things to choose from. So those are the big highlights for me as far as the strengths of this game. Beautiful miniatures, some interesting gameplay mechanics going on, and a good deal of variety in how you can build your force and the different choices you have when you're doing that. Some of the problems I want to talk about are going to be solved, I think, with the new campaign, but they're still worth talking about in case the creators they still want some feedback to really find ways that they can improve on what is lacking here. So the first thing I'll talk about is the rule book. This is a book that they know needs redone. So I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but like it looks nice. But when you get into it, you see this beautiful art. One of the big positives for me is here's where the rules begin, and here's where they end. Not very big section for rules. So what's nice about this is when you're going to try and convince someone to play with you, you don't have this huge tome of rules that they were going to look at and be like, I don't want to have to learn all that. It's actually relatively easy of a game to teach once you know the rules. And I'm not an expert on the rules, but I feel like I got them down pretty good for this first try, but it took a lot of work. And that's the biggest problem with the rule book is just when you're reading it, you'll come across rules that they're worded very strangely, or they're not very clear, or there are things like, for example, the setup. They have, this board, and they'll just say, put the models in the starting areas. But those starting areas aren't very well defined on the board, and there's no picture of the battlefields in the book that say these are the starting areas, because they're actually just like here and the opposite, that green section over there. It's a little obvious for that side, but not for this side. Furthermore, the terrain on the board, there are pictures of it in the book of what they are, but because they're just printed on, there's no 3D element to them, it can get lost when there's a lot of models moving around on the board, just exactly where you can and can't go and what's a cliff and what's just rough terrain or those kinds of things. Like, it can be a little bit confusing as far as setup goes. And so I know they're going to address that. They're going to add some cardboard pieces that you can put on the table, on the battlefield, that'll help you define the terrain and things like that. So that should be made better. But like, for example, when we talk about rules, there's this rule about advantage and disadvantage. When I first read these rules, I didn't understand what the bonus was for advantage. It didn't make sense to me. I needed to read it 3 or 4 times. Essentially what happens is as you roll your attacks, you'll have an attack value on your unit like this. So you can see here it's 4. So when she attacks someone, she's going to roll 4 dice. And then there are various ways to get what's called advantage or disadvantage. The target of the attack will try and give the attacker disadvantage, and the attacker tries to get advantage. And so you'll have all these different sources, and you'll count them up, and then you'll compare. So if she had 2 sources of advantage versus the target's 1 source, then she would overall get 1 point of advantage for her attack. And so then instead of rolling 4 dice, she rolls 5. And once those dice are rolled, she then has to remove one of those rolled dice. And I just thought to myself, well, that doesn't make sense to add dice and then take them away. Until after the 3rd or 4th read, where I figured out that what's happening is she's always going to have 4 dice as her result for her attack. but the advantage adds some better odds that she'll get better numbers, and disadvantage gives her worse odds to get good numbers, because if say it was a disadvantage of 1, then her opponent gets to take a dice away, and so the opponent would obviously pick the best number and get rid of it. So that seemed like obvious, but the advantage just wasn't. So when they're redoing the rules, hopefully they'll add little descriptions maybe that say like the point of advantage is to improve the odds of you getting better numbers, but it doesn't actually make the number of dice you roll higher, like for the whole attack. I don't know how they would word it, but it just was weird to me. There's also quite a few cards, the fate cards, where they'll talk about enchanting an enemy and then attacking that enemy, and like who's attacking whom you don't know, and like who gets what benefit, and it's a little confusing. Some of that stuff could be worked out. Most of my complaints are with the rules like that and just some of the wording, and so that kind of stuff can be easily worked out. You just got to go through each card and see if it makes sense to people. It comes out with playtesting and stuff, so I'm really hopeful they do that. The only other couple nagging issues that I would point out is like you have these tokens for the game for different status effects, and there are a lot of them. I mean, there's just like these are damaged, so that's fine, but you can see like a lot of different statuses. These aren't actually too bad once you figure out what all the symbols mean, but they're very small tokens, and so me with my big fingers, I have a hard time picking them up. They're also not double-sided, which some people are annoyed by. For me, it's mostly just that they're small. I wish they were a little bit bigger. So that's one thing. Also, the cards all have this same backing on them. So if you have them all like in a stack in your insert, if you haven't sleeved them like mine, they'll fit in the insert. They won't fit if you've sleeved them, so that would be nice if they would. But they all have the same back. So maybe if like some text that says like this is a fake card, so you'd know what all is fake. Because when you're first learning the game, like this card and this card, you can see like they're different, but it doesn't say anywhere on here that this is a fate card, other than it has this fate symbol. But they have the same back, so it would maybe be nice if they could say like which was which. And then the only other like thing that really sort of bugged us when we were playing was you're rolling these dice, and they give you these really nice marbled dice. There's just some plain black ones that come with the base game, but if you get the faction boxes that they're offering, you get these dice. They each have like a symbol on them. I'm not gonna be able to find it nicely. Here we go, like this. As far as I can tell, maybe I'm getting this rule wrong, I don't know. But as far as I know, this is a 0. And I just don't like it when they put a cool custom symbol on a die and then rolling that symbol is a bad result. In the game, 5s are criticals, and they allow you to do different effects. Like if you can, if you want, roll an extra die when you roll a 5. But like you see this and you go, oh, that seems like it'd be great, but it's a 0, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because I hope I am, but if not, like maybe do something to make this symbol be what you want to roll. Otherwise, it's a little annoying. It's not like the biggest thing, but that was just something that I thought was a little bit annoying. So just to summarize, rulebook, pretty spotty. It's getting redone. Tokens are pretty small. Some of the mechanics need to be better explained as to what bonus they're providing, what that means. Some of the card backs, maybe it'd be nice if they were labeled differently, and maybe make the dice symbol not be a 0, unless I'm wrong with that. But for the most part, all of those things, I read about the rule book and all that before I played the game, and that was what stopped me from playing. it's weird how some of those things can keep you from enjoying something really, really good. But it did for the longest time. This game sat on my shelf and I didn't play it because every time I took the rule book out, I'd get frustrated and I just put it back. So it's, the rules, the ease of getting the game to the table, those are the things that for some reason can be a real big barrier for someone to play your game. And so my big hope is that, as they promised, they're going to make a rule book that eliminates those problems. And then I think, the hurdle is to convince people that underneath those problems is actually a fun, good game that people need to buy or should buy. Because, there are a lot of great Kickstarters and other games being produced these days, and you need not to have these kinds of barriers, so that when people see the minis, they go, oh my gosh, but is the game good? People will be like, yes, the game is good. Well, I can tell you the game is good. I like it a lot. And once we get those rules, once we get like better cards, we're going to have some bigger battlefields. These are a little narrow, the ones they gave us. I think there's something really special here, and it's worth looking into. I should say, like the first Kickstarter, I learned, unfortunately, quite late into the project fulfilling, that this was actually being done by just pretty much one guy and someone who he had helping to be on the comments section of the Kickstarter. So Vincent was running the show, like they were hiring people to do sculpting and writing and everything, but largely it was just him in his spare time. And I don't know about you, but it's pretty fantastic that he was actually able to produce this game in the state that it is. And it's great that he's going to be able to come back with a few more people on his staff, for the duration of the campaign, hopefully permanently, if they're going to grow and to make it even better. So shout out to like Officer Brush, who was in the comments of the first Kickstarter, for being patient with me and other people. I know like some backers have received their games and they have a lot of broken pieces. Some people got pretty bad copies that shouldn't have gotten past quality control, but they've still been working this whole time throughout the year trying to get all that figured out. Replacement parts weren't sent out. I know people have been really frustrated. I've been really frustrated. They're finally sending those out. 2021, we're in August. This funded in 2018, delivered 2020. They're still trying to make it right, which I really appreciate. I myself had most of my stuff be just fine, but I did need a couple replacement parts, and those have shipped, which I'm excited, because one of the parts is for a hero I really wanted to try. So yeah, they have now some extra people. They're going to relaunch the campaign in September, and I think if you have been looking at the minis, you've been hearing about the gameplay, and it's sounded interesting to you, that they deserve a serious look. Anyway, I know Kickstarters, there's so many, you got to be real careful about where you put your money, and you want to make sure that you're giving it to companies who are going to deliver on the promises that they make. And I was really on the fence about this one, I'll be honest, because I was so frustrated. There were quite a few bumps in the road during the campaign fulfillment. But now I think a lot of those are ironed out. I'm really hopeful anyway. I've been chatting with some of the people on the Discord for this game, and I read the updates and I've been watching their videos, and there's a real, a desire to make this good and to make this something that will last and that people will enjoy. So I feel like, for me anyway, that I can back this game safely, because I mean, some companies might have just given up by now on doing replacements or fixing the things. And you know, despite there being a lot of frustrated backers, and you know, if any of those backers are watching this, like I feel for you. And I think about the people all the time who, you know, they're not getting their parcels, they're waiting forever, they want more communication and stuff. And I look for companies who are trying to fix that going forward and actually doing it. And this company seems like they are doing that. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Limbo Eternal War seems like a good game, like a game if you like what you see, that you can back and be sure you're going to get the product that they're showing. And it's going to be improved over the original version. Not a second edition, but a 1.5. So I don't know, just thought I would share those impressions with you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.